Welcome to Quantum Mind Hub Stories. Before we dive in, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with friends. Remember to drop your thoughts, perspectives, and lessons learned in the comments section. Alright, get comfy. Let's get started. Under the warm glow of city streetlights, it all began with the buzz of her phone. She was laughing at a silly meme her best friend had sent when the message from him popped up, stealing every ounce of joy from her face. It read, "I'm done. Don't contact me again." No explanation, no last conversation, nothing. She froze there on the bustling sidewalk, clutching her phone like it was the only thing anchoring her to reality. A wave of panic and heartbreak surged through her so powerfully that her knees weakened. People rushed by, indifferent strangers unaware that her entire world had just caved in. Her chest tightened as if the city itself pressed down on her lungs. In an instant, she realized he had not just left a message, he had vanished. Her bank account was suddenly zero, her rent unpaid, and she was receiving calls from the landlord demanding answers. That night, she scrolled through every text, every photo, searching for the turning point, something that could explain how the charm of her once perfect boyfriend had twisted into this cold cruelty. She felt hollow, like a puppet abruptly severed from its strings. As tears wet her cheeks, she managed to type back, "Why?" But silence was her only reply. It would be weeks before she learned he had quietly moved to a new neighborhood with someone fresh, someone unburdened by the life changes looming for her. And so, on that brisk autumn night, when she should have been planning her future with the man she loved, she stood alone on the sidewalk as the city lights blinked and blurred into one giant swirl, reflecting her heartbreak and confusion back at her. A week later, she found herself in a cramped clinic waiting room. The fluorescent lights hummed in unison with her racing thoughts. She sat among strangers, all clutching their own silent secrets. The doctor's words were clear: "You're not just pregnant, you're expecting twins." Shock reverberated through her, and she let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Pregnant? Twins? She had come in for routine blood work, suspecting something was off with her body, but she never anticipated this. Her mind spun with 1,000 unanswered questions. How would she manage? Where would she live? She had exactly $17 to her name, and that was only because she'd found an old $20 bill in a forgotten coat pocket the night before. She'd used 3 of those dollars on a granola bar from the clinic vending machine, the half-eaten wrapper still clenched in her trembling hand. Tears threatened to spill, but she swallowed them back, determined not to fall apart in front of these strangers. There was a moment, a flicker of something. In her chest, a bizarre mix of fear and protectiveness swirling together. Twin heartbeats. 2 fragile lives now depended entirely on her, and their father was gone. She silently cursed him, his arrogance, his cowardice. The memory of his text message stung her anew. She wanted to storm out, to vanish herself, but she placed a hand over her belly instead. The doctor offered a gentle smile as he handed her pamphlets on prenatal care. She thanked him softly and rose to leave. A part of her believed she had just stepped onto a rickety raft in the middle of a stormy sea. She would have to find a way to navigate these treacherous waters alone, no matter how impossible it seemed. The fallout was swift and cruel. Friends she'd partied with, shared jokes with, and confided in suddenly evaporated into thin air. Some, she suspected, took his side, convinced she had driven him away with her drama. Others simply ghosted her, not wanting to be tangled in the mess. One day, she overheard a group of girls she once considered close, snickering behind her back at a coffee shop. "She's just another statistic," one hissed. Another rolled her eyes, mocking, "Single mom of twins. No money, no job." Classic cautionary tale. Her cheeks burned with shame, and she ducked out of sight, tears welling. She had been naive to believe everyone would stand by her, that loyalty was guaranteed in friendships the way it was in childhood. Feeling like a social outcast, she retreated to a borrowed bedroom floor in a distant cousin's place. Days turned into weeks as she tried to apply for jobs, but her resume sat overshadowed by the obvious. She was pregnant with twins. Most employers wouldn't even return her calls, let alone hire her. Groceries dwindled, and she lived off cheap instant noodles and tap water. At night, as she curled up on a thin mattress, she felt the flutter of tiny kicks, reminders that she wasn't truly alone. But those small movements also highlighted her biggest fear: she had nowhere to turn and no one to rely on. The city's distant skyline mocked her every time she looked out the window, a reminder of how big the world was and how small and insignificant she felt. For the first time, she understood how people could sink into despair. In that swirling emptiness of betrayal and abandonment, she clung to the one truth she couldn't ignore: her babies needed her, and she would have to find a way forward for them somehow. She cycled through an endless loop of floors and couches. Each time a friend or acquaintance offered a spare spot, she silently braced herself for the inevitable day she'd have to leave. Sometimes it was a whispered conversation: "She's too much, we can't support her." Other times it was outright rejection, a cold shoulder accompanied by phrases like, "I'm sorry, but you'll need to find somewhere else soon." Late at night, she would stare at the ceiling in the darkness, her tears soaking a borrowed pillow. She muffled her cries into towels, not wanting to wake anyone. But the nights were the hardest when the movements in her belly felt like an accusation: "You're supposed to protect us. Where's our home?" She had never felt so powerless. In a world that moved so fast, she felt stuck, cradling dreams that seemed impossible to catch. And yet, she persisted, numbly going through the motions of each day, waiting for a glimmer of hope. Sometimes she'd daydream about a future where she could afford a small apartment with a door she could lock, a safe place for her girls. On her worst nights, she imagined confronting him, demanding answers, and watching him squirm under the weight of his guilt. But in reality, he was nowhere to be found, and the city never paused long enough to care about her heartbreak. One moment etched in her mind came when she looked at herself in a mirror propped against a couch. Bags under her eyes, hair unkempt, hope nearly extinguished. She hardly recognized the woman staring back. That's when she decided she had to muster every last drop of resilience within her. For the sake of the two heartbeats inside her, she would rise, even if it killed her in the process. Her life changed the day she opened her social media and wrote a post so raw, so unfiltered, that it felt like she was slicing open a vein for the world to see. She poured out the betrayal, the loneliness, and the crushing weight of expecting twins by herself. She described the humiliation of being laughed at, the sting of rejection from people she once held close, and the terror of not knowing where her next meal would come from. Typing through tears, she nearly deleted the entire thing, worried about oversharing. But a voice inside said, "What do you have left to lose?" So she clicked post and tried to forget about it, never expecting it would gain any traction. But somewhere in the vast, chaotic ether of the internet, her words resonated. Within hours, the post was shared hundreds, then thousands of times. Comments poured in from women who had walked similar paths or who simply felt her anguish. Strangers from across the globe messaged her words of encouragement, advice, and heartfelt solidarity. She read messages from single mothers who had clawed their way out of poverty, from people who'd experienced emotional abuse and made it to the other side. Each story felt like a beacon of light in her darkness, a reminder that maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. When she woke the next morning, groggy-eyed and still exhausted from a restless night, she discovered her post had gone viral. The notifications were endless, and her inbox was flooded with heartfelt offers. Money, job leads, a spare room, even baby clothes. Though she couldn't accept most of them without caution, the outpouring of empathy started to thaw the icy despair she'd been living in. For the first time in months, she felt something foreign: hope. The direct messages were the most surprising part of her sudden viral fame. Beyond the well-wishers and trolls, which inevitably showed up, she found a few real opportunities. One woman, a small business owner in the Midwest, offered her a remote position doing administrative tasks and customer support. It wasn't a dream gig, but it was something she could do from anywhere, as long as she had internet access. With trembling hands, she emailed back her resume, hardly believing she might have an actual shot. Another message came from a community of single mothers who pooled resources and provided each other with advice, discounts, and emotional support. It felt like she had stumbled onto a secret society of women who refused to let each other drown in life's struggles. She joined their weekly Zoom calls, shy at first, but gradually opening up about her anxieties. It was on one of these calls that a seasoned mom of 4 calmly reassured her, "Honey, you can do this. You're stronger than you think. When the babies come, you'll find a strength you never knew you had." Those words clung to her like a life preserver in a turbulent sea. She also received messages from cynics, accusing her of fabricating her story for attention or donations. Though they stung, she found them easier to ignore as she discovered genuine allies. Meanwhile, the freelancing gig moved forward, and she began making just enough money to save up for prenatal vitamins, a few pieces of maternity clothing, and better meals than the old ramen routine. Every day was a stepping stone, a small but meaningful shift away from the despair that had once consumed her. And as the twin heartbeats grew stronger inside her, her own heartbeat found a steadier, more determined rhythm. She never intended to become a digital hustler, but necessity has a way of molding hidden talents. Once she secured the remote administrative job, she spent her nights learning everything she could about freelancing, from graphic design tutorials on YouTube to branding and copywriting podcasts. It was a ragtag, self-taught education fueled by desperation. She'd put in hours of practice, designing imaginary logos or writing mock advertisements. Then she'd post her work on online marketplaces, hoping anyone would see promise in her beginner efforts. Sleep became a luxury she could no longer afford. She'd wake up with swollen ankles and a stiff back, thanks to her pregnancy and the makeshift floor bed she was still using. Yet each day she rose determined to chip away at the mountain of financial instability. The first time she scored a paying freelance gig. Designing a flyer for a local hair salon, she practically danced in her cousin's cramped living room. That $50 meant groceries, a small reprieve from the gnawing anxiety that hovered over her like a shadow. Over time, she learned how to navigate tricky clients, negotiate her rates, and deliver work that sparkled just enough to earn her glowing reviews. Word spread, and soon she was juggling projects from small businesses, influencers, and nonprofits that wanted her creative flair. She might have been pregnant with twins, couch surfing, and battling constant fatigue, but she'd found a spark within herself. For the first time since her heartbreak, she wasn't just surviving, she was growing, cultivating a skill set that could pave a future for her children. She didn't realize it yet, but she was on the brink of transforming her desperation into a full-blown empire, one born from a place of necessity but fueled by a fierce resolve she never knew she had. The birth of her twins was an event that nearly broke the internet. It happened almost by accident. She had gone into labor a few weeks early, feeling an odd combination of terror and awe as the contractions started coming strong. A close friend, one of the few who had stuck by her, began live blogging the experience as a way to update the wave of online supporters who had followed her journey so far. Between labored breaths, she told her friend to be completely honest, no filters, no sugarcoating. "Show them what it's really like," she gasped. And so the friend did, the pain, the fear, the tears, even the frantic hustle when a minor complication arose, sending doctors rushing around her. In that raw, vulnerable moment, the internet watched a woman become a mother of two in real time. Her screams of anguish were felt across timelines, but so were her tears of triumph when she finally heard the first cries of her baby girls. Hospitals aren't glamorous and childbirth is messy, but the authenticity moved people. Comments poured in from thousands of viewers who felt as though they just witnessed a miracle. Some cried, some applauded, and many cheered her on with messages like, "We're with you, and you're so strong." By the time she held her tiny, squalling daughters in her arms, the post had gone viral, racking up views and shares like wildfire. Despite the doctors and nurses buzzing around, despite the beeping machines, she felt a newfound clarity as she gazed at her babies. They were perfect, so delicate yet so alive. And in that moment, she understood she had just embarked on the fiercest chapter of her life, motherhood, and she was determined to make it a story worth telling. Bringing the twins home, well, to a friend's spare room, was a dizzying ride of joy and anxiety. The first nights blurred into each other, filled with feeding schedules, diaper changes, and her own frantic attempts to juggle freelance work. She discovered a knack for multitasking that would impress even the most seasoned parent, drafting social media graphics with one hand while cradling a baby in the other. In between feedings, she sketched out what she hoped could be her own brand's logo, scribbling names and motifs that might someday adorn t-shirts or mugs. Each time she glanced at the sketches, she envisioned a future where those designs would pay for diapers, formula, and maybe, just maybe, a place she could truly call home. The twins were named Amelia and Jade, two tiny miracles who brought sunshine into her life with their sleepy smiles and midnight cries. Neighbors cooed over the stroller when she'd step out for a quick breath of fresh air, but she still felt the weight of uncertainty pressing on her chest. Bills were mounting, and she never knew if she'd have enough for the next week. Yet her social media presence continued to grow after the viral birth story. People admired her grit, her brutal honesty, and the adorable snapshots of her daughters. She learned to harness that attention, directing it toward her fledgling freelance services. That's when the first idea for a t-shirt slogan came to her, something that read like a defiant battle cry against all odds. She jotted it down, betrayed but not broken. It felt therapeutic, like reclaiming her narrative. While the world might still smirk at the single mom with twins, she was determined to rewrite that story, letter by letter, design by design. They still laughed, of course. Online trolls called her an attention seeker, accusing her of milking sympathy for profit. Locals whispered behind her back, pointing to the second-hand stroller she pushed while her phone chirped incessantly with business notifications. But she kept working. On nights when Amelia and Jade finally settled, she'd brew a strong cup of coffee and plug away at designs until her eyes threatened to close on their own. One day, she took the leap and released a limited run of t-shirts with a bold phrase, "Broke. Betrayed. Boss." She promoted it through her growing social channels. Her followers loved the raw energy of it, and the shirts sold out in just 48 hours. When she saw the numbers in her PayPal account, she nearly dropped her phone. She'd made $11,000 more money than she'd ever held in her life in just a few days. The magnitude of that success momentarily paralyzed her. She stared at the screen, tears filling her eyes, remembering how someone had once told her she was used up and worthless. Now she was watching proof that the story had changed. The taste of victory was sweet, but it also kindled a fierce determination in her. She wasn't just going to stop at t-shirts. She saw a future filled with products that told stories, that inspired resilience, that catered to anyone who'd ever felt discarded and underestimated. In the same breath, she steeled herself for the inevitable backlash. Success always had critics, especially for someone in her position. Yet, each hurdle she faced only lit her resolve brighter. She might have been navigating life from a borrowed couch, but in her mind, she was already sitting on a throne built out of her own sweat and tears, and she was nowhere near finished. With the money from the t-shirt sales, she took her first major gamble, investing in a small inventory of apparel under a newly minted brand name, Betrayed, but Bossing Up. For the brand logo, she chose a stylized image of a phoenix rising from ashes, something that symbolized rebirth from the ruins of her old life. She poured every bit of her journey into the brand's ethos, ensuring each product came with a short, empowering blurb about resilience and survival. Customers seemed to resonate with the authenticity. Her story was plastered across social media, and each sale felt like a personal victory against the narrative that she was done for. Still juggling motherhood, she'd answer customer service emails during diaper changes, scribble marketing strategies while rocking one twin to sleep, and drop off orders at the post office with both babies in a double stroller. There was an intimacy to it all. She was branding her pain, turning each heartbreak and every betrayal into motivation. Though it felt exploitative at times, she reminded herself that it wasn't about glamorizing struggle. It was about showing that struggle could birth something powerful if you refused to be ashamed. And as the orders rolled in, so did a newfound sense of purpose. This wasn't just about making money to survive. It was about forging a path that other single moms, underdogs, and overlooked people could follow. From the simplest t-shirt design to the heartfelt copy on her website, everything was a reflection of her evolution. She was no longer the woman shattered by a text message. She was becoming a catalyst for change, one product, one story at a time. When a random TikTok user with a sizable following stumbled upon her brand, everything went from hopeful to frenetic. The user did a quick video showcasing one of her Betrayed but Bossing Up hoodies, and it exploded overnight. Orders poured in from around the globe. She woke up one morning to find her inbox overflowing with customer queries, partnership offers, and heartfelt notes from people who felt seen by her message. Suddenly, her store was sold out and a waitlist of 30,000 eager buyers formed in just 2 weeks. She was overwhelmed. Her small homegrown operation wasn't ready for this kind of volume, and she scrambled printing services, inventory storage, and shipping solutions that could keep up. It was exhilarating but terrifying. On a personal level, she just moved into a modest apartment, her first official lease in her own name since the heartbreak. Amelia and Jade finally had their own cribs, and she had a dedicated desk space to manage her booming business. Yet the challenges multiplied along with the orders. She barely had time to sleep, living on energy drinks and the unstoppable momentum of her brand's viral moment. Through it all, she tried to keep her social media candid, sharing the chaos behind the scenes. From spilled coffee over shipping labels to the twins throwing toddler tantrums while she negotiated bulk printing costs, she remained transparent. Strangely, this authenticity only increased her following. People loved that she was a real mom, fighting for a real dream, and in a world saturated with curated perfection, her chaos was a breath of fresh air. She felt the tide turning, a wave of support carrying her forward as she rode the biggest high of her life, completely unaware of how many more mountains she'd soon have to climb. The night she logged into her business account and realized she'd hit her first six-figure month, she dropped her phone, hands trembling. A giddy surge of disbelief coursed through her. She paced her living room, still cluttered with shipping supplies, trying to wrap her head around the reality that her modest clothing line had generated more in 30 days than some people earned in an entire year. In that moment, she felt the full weight of responsibility descend upon her shoulders. Could she sustain this? The next day, she took a bold step and rented a small warehouse space in a more affordable industrial area, converting it into her own fulfillment center. The place smelled of fresh paint and cardboard boxes, but to her, it smelled like possibility. She hired a couple of part-timers, other single moms she knew who needed flexible hours, and they set up an assembly line of shirts, packaging, and shipping labels. For the first time, she felt less alone in this journey. At night, she'd come home to an apartment that finally felt like a safe haven. She decorated the twins' room with pastel colors and sweet decals of cartoon animals. On weekends, she'd take them to a little park down the street, pushing them on baby swings as she marveled at how far she'd come. It felt surreal to think that not long ago, she was counting coins for bus fare, pregnant and terrified. Now, Amelia and Jade had warm beds, she had steady income, and the brand had soared beyond her wildest dreams. Of course, new problems lurked on the horizon. Fake friends, opportunists, unexpected challenges. But for a brief, shining moment, it was enough to revel in the wonder of what she'd built from the ashes of her past. Success has a way of resurrecting old ghosts. She learned that lesson when people who had once derided her began popping up in her DMs and texts. The same former friends who'd snickered at her baby bump behind her back now acted like they'd always been supportive. "Hey girl, so proud of you. We should catch up," they'd write, accompanied by heart emojis and winking faces. She felt the sting of hypocrisy each time. At first, she tried responding politely, but the interactions left her feeling hollow. It wasn't about holding grudges, she simply recognized that their interest was transactional. In a city that never truly sleeps, gossip also never dies. Whispers circulated that she'd gotten lucky, that she was just another internet one-hit wonder who would eventually fade away. She paid them no mind, letting the swirling negativity pass by like a foul wind. But she did notice how the laughter that once targeted her misfortunes had turned into a different kind of jeering skepticism toward her achievements. Meanwhile, she remained laser-focused on her business and her twins. She'd get up at dawn, feed Amelia and Jade, answer overnight customer service inquiries, and then dive into brainstorming new product lines. She tested everything herself: t-shirt fabrics, baby-friendly accessories, and even a few skincare prototypes. On nights when she felt lonely or stressed, she'd pause to look at old photos of her younger self, wide-eyed and trusting, before the heartbreak. She could barely recognize that girl now. She'd grown into someone hardened by betrayal yet softened by motherhood, a paradox of resilience and vulnerability. Each day, she reminded herself, let them talk. Their chatter was background noise in a life now fueled by something far deeper, an unbreakable will to protect her family and honor the journey that had shaped her. Her life took a surreal turn the day she received an email with the subject line, "Interview Opportunity, Oprah Winfrey Network." She stared at the screen, scarcely believing her eyes. It turned out her raw posts and entrepreneurial success had caught the attention of a producer who was gathering stories of resilience and triumph. A whirlwind of phone calls and scheduling ensued, and before she knew it, she was sitting in a sleek TV studio, stage lights shining brighter than the midday sun. Dressed in a modest yet stylish pantsuit, one of her brand's blazers, actually, she tried to keep her heart from hammering out of her chest. When Oprah asked her, "What made you not give up?" her mind flashed back to sleeping on a friend's floor, tears staining the old towels she used as blankets. She remembered the betrayal, the heartbreak, the daily rejections. And she remembered Amelia and Jade kicking inside her belly when she felt on the verge of giving in. Finally, she spoke, voice wavering at first, but growing steadier with each word. "I did give up," she admitted. "I gave up every night, crying until I had no tears left. But by morning I'd realize I had 2 reasons, my daughters, to keep trying anyway." The audience hushed, some dabbing at tears. Oprah nodded, empathy shining in her eyes. It was a cathartic moment, one that felt more real than any viral post or sales milestone. She wasn't just the tragic ex-girlfriend turned success story anymore, she was a mother who had learned to rise from the wreckage. By the end of the interview, her phone was buzzing nonstop with new followers, partnership offers, and messages of encouragement. The world had just gotten a front-row seat to her truth, and for the first time, she felt genuinely seen. Right on cue, as if summoned by some cosmic script, her ex surfaced again shortly after the Oprah interview aired. A string of missed calls from an unknown number made her suspicious, but then he texted, "Hey, it's me. We need to talk." Her stomach clenched at the sight of his name. Memories flashed. His charming grin, his calculated vanishing act, and that devastating text message that turned her life upside down. But curiosity nibbled at her, so she eventually picked up. His voice sounded worn, depleted of the suave confidence he once wielded like a weapon. He stuttered excuses, something about a failed relationship and losing a job. He tried to paint his desperation as a tragic downfall, but she saw through the act. He wanted money. Maybe he also wanted to ride the wave of her newfound fame. She felt a cold fury settle in her chest as he asked if they could meet for coffee, like old times. She almost laughed. On a whim, she agreed, but privately arranged a live social media stream under the guise of spontaneous Q&A with fans. When he showed up, she discreetly started the broadcast. He talked circles around his plight, weaving sob stories she suspected weren't entirely true. Finally, he hinted at the possibility of reconnecting, claiming he'd always loved her. She sipped her coffee, listening until she couldn't anymore. Then, calmly, she told him, "I'm not interested in revisiting the past. You walked away when it mattered most." She didn't need to raise her voice. Her composure delivered the message. Viewers watched in real time as he attempted damage control, backpedaling clumsily until he stormed off, slamming the cafe door behind him. The internet erupted. Support poured in for her, while memes mocking his audacity spread like wildfire. She had officially closed that chapter, and everyone witnessed the final slam. With her newfound celebrity came critics who called her brand a well-packaged fraud. They questioned her authenticity and financial transparency, accusing her of profiting off pity. Instead of hiding, she decided to open the books publicly. In a bold livestream, she went through her revenue, expenses, donations, and charitable partnerships line by line. She explained how every dollar went back into expanding the business, supporting her twins, and employing other single mothers who needed flexible work. She even posted screenshots of tax returns with sensitive data redacted to quell the doubters. The move was unprecedented. Supporters praised her for her honesty, and the media took note. The narrative shifted from "is she real?" to "she's redefining what it means to be a transparent influencer." The backlash had inadvertently given her a platform to showcase her integrity. It also freed her from the weight of suspicion. Once the numbers were out there, she felt a renewed sense of legitimacy, a reassurance that she was doing more than just turning pain into profit. She was building a sustainable mission. This transparency wasn't just about silencing naysayers, it was about clarifying her purpose. Yes, she had been betrayed, broken, and dismissed, but her success didn't have to be a secret guarded behind corporate spin. If anything, laying it all bare solidified her connection with her audience, making them feel even more invested in her journey. By the end of the live stream, thousands were in the comments, applauding her courage. In a world where deception and hidden agendas run rampant, she had laid her story bare once again, further proving that vulnerability, backed by truth, is a powerful weapon against doubt. Despite the critics, the brand kept expanding. She realized she had unwittingly become a mom influencer. But that title never sat right with her. She wasn't just about cute baby photos and sponsored diaper ads. She was a CEO, a visionary determined to transform her personal triumph into a platform for others who'd been overlooked. So, she launched new product lines, skincare specifically formulated for busy moms, a baby carrier that balanced style and comfort, and even a podcast called Built from Rock Bottom. In her podcast episodes, she interviewed fellow survivors of betrayal, poverty, and heartbreak, shining a light on how they rose against the odds. She spoke with entrepreneurs who started businesses in their garages, single parents who defied stereotypes, and everyday people who found success through sheer willpower. The stories were raw, unpolished, and deeply inspiring. Downloads skyrocketed, and advertisers flocked to sponsor her content. Yet she made it clear that she wouldn't compromise her authenticity for a paycheck. She turned down flashy endorsements that didn't align with her brand ethos, focusing instead on partnerships that made sense for her audience. The resulting credibility paid off tenfold. Each new venture felt like a piece of a puzzle falling into place, shaping her into a modern Renaissance woman. By day, she was overseeing manufacturing and shipping from her growing warehouse team. By night, she recorded podcast episodes and tested new skincare prototypes. Somewhere in between, she managed to read bedtime stories to Amelia and Jade, tucking them in with a kiss and a silent promise that she would always strive to provide the life they deserved. She was far from perfect, but she was unapologetically real, a mom, a CEO, a force to be reckoned with. The crescendo came when her brand soared to a 9-figure valuation. Industry insiders were stunned. Media outlets reported breathlessly on the single mom's success story who had turned heartbreak into a global phenomenon. But numbers only told half the story. What truly mattered was the ripple effect she was creating. She'd quietly begun hiring single mothers across her fulfillment centers and remote offices, offering them flexible hours and on-site childcare options. The number of employees hit triple digits, many of them women who once believed no one would give them a shot. Meanwhile, her online presence exploded, hitting 1 billion views across various platforms. Videos, live streams, articles, and interviews. She tried to keep her feet on the ground, remembering the nights she had cried into towels, unsure where she'd sleep next. Now, she had business advisors suggesting expansion into global markets, and celebrity stylists were requesting her apparel for red carpet events. In the midst of this dizzying whirlwind, her daughters grew into curious toddlers, their personalities shining through. Their giggles became the soundtrack to her days, a constant reminder of her why. She'd steal moments away from meetings to read them fairy tales or race toy cars across the living room floor. Each day, she grew more convinced that the real fortune she possessed wasn't the monetary kind, though that certainly helped, but the wealth of love she felt for these two little humans who called her Mama. As headlines declared her the millionaire mogul mom, she chose to focus on a different narrative. She was still that woman who had once held onto hope with white-knuckled desperation, and now she wanted to extend that hope to as many others as she could. Amelia and Jade were almost 3 when the tough questions started rolling off their tiny tongues. "Where's Daddy?" Jade asked one morning, big brown eyes wide with innocence. Amelia echoed the question, equally curious. She paused, heart-hammering. How do you explain abandonment to 2 children whose only fault was existing? She opted for honesty, at least an age-appropriate version. "Daddy's not with us right now, but you have Mommy and I love you more than anything." Later that night, her mind churned. She feared the day they'd truly understand the cruel truth behind why he left. So she poured her emotions into something constructive, a children's book titled My Mom is My Superhero. It featured a brave mom who, with the help of her 2 clever daughters, overcame monsters of doubt and heartbreak. The book became an instant hit in niche parenting circles, especially among single moms looking for a gentle way to address absent fathers with their kids. She dedicated the first edition to Amelia and Jade, who giggled whenever she read it to them at bedtime, pointing and declaring, "That's us." Each night, she'd tuck them in and wonder if she was doing right by them. The brand was thriving, she was financially secure for perhaps a lifetime, and she had a support system of friends and employees who felt more like family. Yet she knew there were questions she couldn't fully answer until the girls were older. Every choice she made, every business decision and philanthropic step was a move to shape a kinder world for them. Even as she wrestled with her own lingering scars, she found solace in the knowledge that, for Amelia and Jade, this was their normal, a home brimming with love, possibility, and no shortage of bedtime stories where mommy always found a way to win. Years later, she stood on the tarmac of a private airport, the roar of jet engines vibrating through her spine. Embossed on the side of a sleek plane were the names Amelia and Jade, in swirling script, her newly christened private jet. The media was all over it, cameras flashing as she prepared to fly a group of single mothers to Paris for a major pop-up launch. She stepped onto the plane, feeling equal parts awe and disbelief at this new reality. Once everyone was settled, she took a moment to breathe. As the jet ascended, she gazed out at the clouds, recalling the days she couldn't even afford a bus ticket. Now, she was taking others on a journey they'd only dreamed of. Landing in Paris, they were greeted by the press and fans who lined up to catch a glimpse of the woman who had turned tragedy into triumph. She orchestrated a grand pop-up event that showcased not just her brand's apparel, but also stories of mothers worldwide who had overcome adversity. It wasn't about flaunting luxury. It was about breaking barriers. Reporters asked if the plane was just a showy status symbol. She responded with a modest grin, explaining how she intended to use it for philanthropic projects, flying resources and volunteers to communities in need. Still, the spectacle couldn't be denied. She wore a dazzling outfit from her line, each accessory a testament to her creative vision. As she walked the makeshift runway, she couldn't help but remember how it felt to be publicly humiliated, a girl with nowhere to turn. Now, cameras flashed in admiration, not pity. The roar of the crowd was thunderous, but in her heart, she heard a softer sound. Her daughters laughing as they explored the corners of the plane that bore their names, blissfully unaware of just how extraordinary their lives had become. She wanted to do more than talk about giving back, so she launched what she called the Revenge Fund. Initially, people were taken aback by the name, but she explained it wasn't about seeking vengeance on those who wronged her. It was about empowering those who'd been wronged by life's circumstances. The Revenge Fund offered microgrants, mentorship, and business incubator programs specifically for single mothers trying to start their own ventures. Her phone blew up with applications and heartfelt stories of women who had brilliant ideas but no access to capital or guidance. She personally vetted many of them, touched by the parallels to her own journey. Over months, she and her team helped finance cupcake businesses, marketing consultancies, handmade jewelry shops, passion projects turned profitable enterprises. Many recipients posted tearful thank yous, praising her for helping them reclaim their futures. The media latched onto the narrative, Millionaire Mom's revenge is hope for others. She smiled at the irony. This philanthropic endeavor became her personal vow to pay forward the kindness that had once saved her from complete despair. Every success story from the fund reminded her of the day she received a humble remote job offer in her DMs, that tiny spark which lit her path. The Revenge Fund's impact expanded internationally, translating her brand of resilience into countless languages. Critics questioned her motives, but she remained unwavering, guided by the unshakable conviction that generosity and second chances could reshape the lives of people like her. In a society where so many slip through the cracks, she intended to fill those gaps with hope. And each time a struggling mother wrote to share her success, it felt like another piece of her own wounded heart had healed, solidifying the legacy she was determined to leave behind. It was only a matter of time before major publications picked up on the story in a big way. One morning, her phone buzzed nonstop with the announcement that she'd landed on the cover of Forbes under the headline, "From Heartbreak to a Billion-Dollar Brand." The accompanying spread detailed her journey, complete with photos of her at a warehouse full of bustling employees and snapshots of her playing with Amelia and Jade in a sunlit backyard. That same day, internet forums lit up with news that her ex-boyfriend had filed for bankruptcy. Side-by-side images began circulating, a glowing portrait of her on a Forbes cover next to a grainy picture of him leaving a courthouse. The instant meme became a viral sensation, often captioned with phrases like "karma is real" or "shouldn't have left her." She tried not to revel in his downfall, reminding herself that she'd built a life on resilience, not spite. Still, she couldn't deny a small twinge of satisfaction. People on social media turned the juxtaposition into a rallying cry, praising her for shining despite the darkness she once endured. She continued to focus on her work, rolling out new product lines and investing in community-driven events. But the parallels were impossible to ignore. Their diverging paths became symbolic. one soared while the other sank. The inevitable tabloids reached out to her for a reaction. She offered no comment, letting the Forbes cover speak for itself. In private moments, she reflected on the irony that the man who once left her with nothing was now the one with less. Life, it seemed, had its own sense of poetic justice. Rather than gloat, she channeled that energy into gratitude for her daughters, her business, and the second chance at life she'd forged with her own two hands. He attempted one final gambit in the realm of public sympathy, a reunion drama laced with crocodile tears and manipulative pleas. He claimed he deserved to see his children, that they were half his after all. She hesitated, always protective of Amelia and Jade, but the truth was they had never laid eyes on him, never felt the warmth of his presence in their lives. He tried to weaponize that fact, appearing on minor talk shows to argue that she had deliberately kept him away. But the public wasn't having it. The same audience that had watched her raw journey felt nothing but scorn for his sudden paternal instincts. Online backlash erupted, painting him as the epitome of deadbeat opportunism. Sponsors and platforms quickly distanced themselves from his sob story, refusing to risk association with someone so universally reviled. Feeling cornered, he made a desperate attempt to contact her through a lawyer, demanding a private meeting for the sake of the children. This time, there was no viral live stream or public put-down. She quietly met him in a lawyer's office. He tried to feign remorse, tears glistening. She saw a hollow performance. When he mentioned child support, she snorted at the irony. He was broke. He had nothing to give but excuses. The final blow came when the lawyer stepped in, citing her legal rights and documented evidence of his abandonment. Cornered, he lashed out, accusing her of turning the world against him. She calmly reminded him that he had made his own bed when he walked away and the world was merely watching him lie in it. Days later, public sentiment firmly against him, he faded from the limelight once again, leaving her with the clarity that he was just a ghost from a past that held no real power anymore. Amid the storm of legal battles and media circus, a quiet romance found its way into her heart. He was the lead investor in a tech venture she had partnered with to scale her online platform. A soft-spoken man with kind eyes. They started as business acquaintances, exchanging formal emails and shaking hands at board meetings. But late-night brainstorming sessions led to hushed confessions about life, love, and the scars each carried. She discovered he had been divorced too and had a son who lived in another state. Over shared cups of coffee and starlit walks through the city, they gradually pulled back each other's layers. He admired her tenacity, the way she seamlessly balanced motherhood and empire building. She admired his grounded nature, his unwavering support that came without fanfare or ego. Their relationship blossomed quietly, away from the prying eyes of paparazzi. She introduced him to Amelia and Jade, who took to him with surprising ease. She found comfort in the way he read bedtime stories and helped them build blanket forts. For the first time since her heartbreak, she sensed a love that felt whole, respectful of her past but not defined by it. The city glimmered around them, bustling with the noise of success and ambition, but inside this burgeoning relationship was a sanctuary of gentle, deliberate care. It felt surreal to open her heart again, to trust another person not to destroy her world. Yet day by day he showed up, steady, thoughtful, present. And when she glanced at him across a dinner table strewn with business charts and toddler art projects, she couldn't help but marvel at how life had taken her from the depths of betrayal to this quiet space of renewal. The Met Gala was one of those events she'd never imagined attending, let alone shining at. Her brand had reached such dizzying heights that she was invited as a special guest, draped in a custom gown that combined high fashion with subtle nods to her hustle, embroidered phrases like "rise" and "resilience" wove through the fabric. Photographers clamored as she stepped onto the famous red carpet, each flash reminding her of how far she'd come from borrowed couches and tear-soaked floors. Yet the true surprise awaited her inside. Midway through the event, a hush descended in her corner of the grand hall. Curious onlookers began to gather. She turned to see him, her investor-turned-partner, down on one knee, a small box in his hand. Her heart stuttered. She was used to spectacle in her public life, but never had she been the center of such an intimate display. He spoke softly, every word echoing through the hushed crowd. "You've shown me what true resilience looks like. You've given hope to so many, including me. I love you and I love your daughters. Let's build our future together." Cameras flashed, capturing her stunned expression. A wave of euphoria coursed through her as Amelia and Jade, dressed in tiny matching outfits, appeared at the edge of her vision. Security had discreetly let them through. They ran toward her. squealing, "Say yes, Mommy." The tears in her eyes blurred the glittering lights. She nodded, breath catching in her throat. Applause thundered as he slipped the ring onto her finger. The entire internet would soon explode with the news, metaphorically breaking it. But at that moment, she only felt the beating of her heart, the reassuring warmth of this man's hand in hers, and the soft chorus of her daughter's cheering. His last-ditch attempt was both pathetic and chilling. Her ex filed for custody of Amelia and Jade. She learned of the legal motion through an official summons delivered to her office by a sheepish courier. Sitting with her new fiancé, her hands shook reading the document's allegations, that she was an unfit mother who had poisoned the twins against him. Rage boiled beneath her skin, but mostly, she felt sadness that he would stoop so low. The day in court was a spectacle. He arrived with a half-baked legal team that tried to paint her as a manipulative influencer. But the judge, an elderly woman with no patience for theatrics, glowered over her glasses as evidence after evidence contradicted his claims. She listened to testimonies from her employees, friends, and even the mothers she'd helped through her revenge fund. Each voice echoed the same sentiment. She was a caring, responsible, and present mother, not some social media tyrant. Finally, her ex was asked to explain his years of absence. He stumbled, made excuses, tried to pivot blame. The judge visibly fought the urge to roll her eyes. In a moment of almost comedic relief, the judge actually chuckled, shaking her head before dismissing his custody claim as meritless. "Mr. Holton, I suggest you reconsider your priorities," she said, her tone dripping with disapproval. "The court is not a stage for vendettas." And just like that, the gavel dropped. He stood there dumbfounded, muttering curses as security escorted him out. She exhaled, tears brimming, thankful for the legal validation that mirrored the truth she'd always known. That day was the final nail in the coffin of his intrusive attempts. It also served as a potent reminder that justice, when aligned with truth, had a way of setting things right. Netflix knocking at her door felt like a surreal full-circle moment. They wanted the exclusive rights to produce a miniseries based on her life story. Naturally, they insisted on a big-name showrunner and creative control. But she refused to sign away the narrative that had become her legacy. Her attorney negotiated until they offered her an executive producer role, along with creative veto power. "No one tells my story but me," she insisted. The official announcement triggered a media frenzy. Suddenly, she was in script discussions, casting calls, and location scouts. The streaming giant wanted a mix of raw doca footage and dramatized reenactments. She spent hours with writers recounting her earliest struggles, the heartbreak, the viral posts, and each step she'd taken toward becoming a successful entrepreneur. She insisted they capture the emotional core, the heartbreak of betrayal, the sleepless nights, and the unwavering devotion she had for her daughters. Hollywood had its own ideas, of course, but she stood firm on accuracy. Filming commenced months later, with a star-studded cast playing the younger version of her, her ex, and even cameo parts for her supportive friends. The Netflix set buzzed with anticipation. Occasionally, she'd wander around the craft services table comparing the set design, a dingy couch in a cramped apartment, to the real memory etched into her mind. It felt equal parts eerie and empowering to see her past come to life on camera, to watch an actress sobbing into a towel in the very position she once occupied. This time, though, the story would be told in her own words, ensuring that every viewer understood the raw pain, the unwavering hope, and the ultimate triumph. She wasn't just letting the world in on her darkest hours, she was showing them that even the bleakest chapter can illuminate a future brighter than you ever imagined. A wave of nostalgia hit her the day she learned the owners of the house she'd once crashed at were putting it on the market. Memories flooded back, sleeping on their old couch, the squeaky springs poking her ribs, and the nights she'd cry softly, hoping not to disturb anyone. Without hesitating, she arranged to buy the property outright. But she had no intention of moving in. She refurbished it, new paint, new furniture, a well-stocked kitchen, and then held the keys out to a struggling single mother she'd met through her revenge fund. The mother, who'd been on the verge of homelessness with her young son, broke down in tears when handed her new lease. "It's yours," she said simply, her eyes shining. It was a moment that captured the essence of her story. a cycle of compassion and kindness sparked by her own brush with desperation. She felt an emotional weight lift as she walked through the renovated living room, recalling how each step once creaked under the stress of her despair. Now the floors gleamed, a testament to how drastically life could transform. It wasn't about flaunting her success. It was about leaving a piece of her past behind in the most redemptive way possible. Word spread quickly, and locals praised her as a real-life fairy godmother. But she shrugged off the accolades. In her heart, this was simply a debt to the universe she was happily repaying. After all, she remembered the bitterness of feeling powerless, and she vowed never to forget the humility that came from needing a safe place to rest. By gifting that security to another mother, she healed a lingering wound, sealing the circle of empathy that had once been opened for her. At a high-profile keynote event in the heart of the city, she stood on a stage in front of thousands, business leaders, influencers, and starry-eyed entrepreneurs eager for a piece of her wisdom. The lights dimmed, and a hush settled over the room as she began to speak. She recounted her early years of laughter, the sudden text message that shattered her, and the humiliations she endured. She revealed how betrayal fueled her creativity, how heartbreak became her blueprint for success. She spoke of the exhaustion, the tears, and the love for two tiny girls who gave her the courage to keep going. Then came the final crescendo. She looked out at the awestruck faces, tears shimmering in a few eyes. "He left me with nothing," she said, voice quavering just enough to hint at the raw emotion beneath. "Now I have everything, and twins." The crowd erupted into a standing ovation. Confetti cannons burst overhead, a celebratory rain of colored paper drifting down around her as she smiled through happy tears. It felt surreal, a vivid dream turned tangible. She motioned for Amelia and Jade, now giggling girls with big bows in their hair, to join her on stage. They rushed over, hugging her legs, and the applause soared even louder. Cameras flashed, capturing a moment that she hoped would inspire anyone who had ever felt abandoned or defeated. As the audience settled, she thanked them and offered one final invitation. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Tell someone who needs hope. Comment on what resonates with you, because your voice matters too. And with that, she stepped off the stage into a future that sparkled with the possibilities she once thought had been stolen, proving in the most public and triumphant way that no matter how brutal the betrayal, an unstoppable comeback was always within reach.